Today we are going to talk about Argparse. Argparse is a powerful library for managing the command line arguments, and it comes standard in the Python library. First, let's use sys.argv to get the arguments, then we will use Argparse. So first we need to import sys. So here we have declared a couple of variables, a proc name for the first argument that's returned by argv, a name for the second argument, and a num that takes the third argument and it converts it to integer. Then what this piece of code does, it'll print out the proc name, and then it'll run through a for loop for the number of times that you specify, and it'll print the name that you specify that number of times. Okay, let's see that run. So to run Python, the command line, you're going to call Python, and then the name of the program, which in this case it's main.py. Okay, so if we just called main.py, we would get an error because it would say it's expecting arguments. So we're going to pass in arguments. Okay, so you'll see the first print shows the program name. As you can see, that's what the first print does. Okay, it takes so the first argument that sys.argv returns is actually the program name. Okay, and then I'll print it out so you can see. Then the second argument I passed in was my name, and then the number 5, which is the number of times that the for loop will run. Okay, and it's going to print out the name that I passed in so many times. And you can see you're using sys.argv and it gets the arguments based on the position. So now let's do the same thing using Argparse. It might take a bit more code to set it up, but it does a lot more for you. Okay, so first let me first comment this out, and we have to import Argparse. So first we make a parser object, then we add arguments to it. So you can call this anything. I'm just going to call it parser. Okay, then we invoke the parser using the parse_args method, and we assign it to something. So I'm just going to call my object args, and then we're going to use it. Okay, so now let's run it again. Okay, and you'll see it does the exact same thing. So the output is the same. So let me explain the code to you. So you set up a parser, you add arguments to it, and the second one is a num, but you also can declare what type it is. So you can define what the value must be passed in. Then you invoke it, then you reference the arguments based on their name, not on the position that they passed in. If you have noticed this underscore in the for loop here, it's just basically a throwaway placeholder because you have no intention of using a counter in the range. Okay, so that's what that does. Let me demonstrate the importance of the type here. So if I call this again and I type in a character, it's going to complain and it's going to give me an error message to say invalid int value because it's expecting an int because you have just declared it as such. So that is Argparse in a very simple demonstration. We'll move on to something a little bit more complicated. Now let's make something more useful and use some other features of Argparse. I'm going to read in a file and write it to another file, passing the source file name and the destination file name. I will also specify the delimiter. Okay, so I've imported the Argparse module and the CSV module. We'll be using the CSV module for the file manipulation. Okay, so we declare a parser object. So what you can do in this argument parser is you can set up a usage statement and a description. Okay, so as you can see, I've declared a usage variable in here, and there's a description statement. Okay, now if you notice here, there's this percentage S here, and in brackets, it's got a prog there. Okay, so that is actually the prog name, okay, that you can then use to display back to the user if you so wish. So in the usage statement, it's actually going to display the proc name or the script name from Python, Note there's an S there. If you don't have the S there, you're going to get error that doesn't give you a very descriptive error. So just take note there's an S there. Now let's add arguments. Okay, so here I've added the arguments, and you'll see I've given it a -I and a double dash and the full name. Okay, so now these can be used in the code when you want to reference the argument that is passed in. Okay, I've also declared the types that they need to be. I've also given them a default so that if I don't pass in any value, it'll look for a default of that name. I've also used the help keyword, okay, which explains exactly what the help would show you when you request help. So let's invoke it now. Okay, so yeah, I've invoked it and I've given it to the args variable. Okay, so now I can reference all the things by their names. Okay, as you can see, I've used the name, the full name. Okay, if you didn't have this here, you would have to use the -I. Okay, I prefer to use a full name. It's just more descriptive in the code. So as you can see here, I'm passing in these values and then I'm reading in the file and then writing the file out to another file, but I'm writing it in a nice formatted way. So let's run this so you can see it in action, and then we can try and see how we invoke a help file or how we invoke help and so on. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so first of all, I've got a test file here. As you can see, I've got test and it's got some data inside of it, name, surname, and cell num. Okay, as you can see, there it is. And I'm going to write it out like that into the new file. All right. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, so first of all, let's request help. Now you use the -H for help. And you'll see I didn't have to build in help into the program. It's built in already. Argparse builds help files for you, okay, based on all this extra information that you supply, okay, as you can see. So the switch for help is -H, and you get a whole bunch of information. You can see there's my usage statement now that I declared, as you can see, and there is the description, as you can see, okay, and there you can see there's the proc name that are defined over here using this %s, yeah. Okay, and this tells me how to use it. Okay, and I didn't have to do too much extra coding to get this to work. All right, I just declared help tags or help keywords. Okay, so now let's actually use it. And first of all, I'm going to set it up to use the default. Okay, it's a comma separated file. Let's open it with WordPad. You can see it's the same file. Okay, all right. So if I don't pass anything, and I just run it, you will see, okay, you should see an output file here. And there you go. It's nicely formatted the way I wanted it formatted as per the code. Okay, so if I now pass in an actual file and I give it a destination file and I specify the delimiter, let's see, what was my delimiter? I think it's a colon. Okay. Now you'll see it'll give you an error because I'm not using the switches. Okay. So when I am passing in values, I must actually say -I and the input file -O, and the output file, and this is the delimiter. Let's see, what does it give me? It says the delimiter expected one argument. There we go. So I specified the delimiter there in quotes because it was expecting the delimiter. It was expecting the delimiter to be a string. So now you should see another file here, test2, that was created, and there it is. So that's it, guys. That is Argparse in a nutshell and how it can make your command line interface programs much more easier to use and much more easier to manage when you're passing in values, and it builds help files for you. Hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Have a great day. Cheers.